Hello and welcome to another WEBSTER Report on this Sunday, the 18th of January on the Gregorian calendar, 2026. Halfway through the first month of the Gregorian already. Time it seems to have no bounds at the minute. It just seems to be every day is going quicker and quicker and quicker. And we seem to be seeing a lot of things that are happening, and we've got to start now asking those questions about why these things happening. Taylor makes it on. There's a lot of stuff that's happening with Trump that could, Taylor says it's part of a worldwide plan. Well, I've had so many videos and so much correspondence this week. I didn't even know where to start with this, Alex, because the stuff that we've got coming through now, like, we have Taylor who says Netanyahu's not Netanyahu, yet we see Milinovsky, or whatever his real name is, who is Netanyahu, who didn't grow up in Israel, he's from Eastern Europe, grew up in America, and he's been talking about this stuff for 40 odd years, 30, 40 years, Alex. So has it always been part of a plan? Are we seeing it just like Taylor says, where it's got to play out this way to bring, to boil the crap up to the surface, to expose it for the so-called normies, because they can't hear it? What's your take on that before we even start fighting with the tech demons and playing some of these videos?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to answer it really is to repeat a bit of a theme, which is, I've talked in the past about international relations as a discipline, and it's like a form of Christian eschatology, but because Christian eschatology talks about like days of the Lord, which were common in the Old Testament, that also finally envisages a final day of the Lord, which Christians talk about as a judgment day. Well, international relations talks about the rise and fall of empires, and many have risen, many have fallen. The Chinese one lasted for a hell of a long time, over 2,000 years of continuity. So they can last a long time, but invariably they do fall. But we've got a particular perspective in the Bible that came from the ancient Near East, and it's more aligned now with Western understandings in a way than specifically Eastern understandings. So we don't tend to think about China too much in the mix. And when you look at international relations, it's interesting because, whether it's China, whether it's India, what we're looking at now is the rise of powers either that have lain dormant for a long time and have come back into resurgence, like China, or new powers like India that are rising up. But there's a definite shift in the balance of power. That much is really clear. So some people say Trump is just adjusting more realistically to the change in the world order. And by world order, we don't mean the new world order as truthers mean new world order. It's a world order in international relations. It is really just about how all these different nations, they work in some form of workable harmony while representing their own interests. So that's one level on which you can analyze eschatology. And you also get it in astrology, where the planets Jupiter and Saturn historically were always used by prognosticators looking at these patterns and cycles to also talk about expansion and contraction, because Jupiter expands, Saturn contracts, and so the prognosticators looking in the heavens would see patterns in the Jupiter-Saturn cycles. This is going back a good 2,500, 2,600 years to the time of the Babylonian, appearance of astrology in much the kind of form that it exists today, where they weren't as focused on individual horoscopes of people, but astrology was used to look at the rise and fall of empires and mundane events in the world. So we've got these different approaches from different perspectives, some spiritual, some secular, that talk about the ebb and flow of the energy between nations. So, from a Christian point of view, it looks like this could be a culmination point that has finality to it. In international relations, it would just be another chapter of a familiar story that repeats itself in different configurations from time to time. Same with Jupiter-Saturn cycles. There's a lot of evidence, if you just look at it on that level, planetary movements, as above, so below as well. So there is a spiritual dimension to that. Jason wouldn't be too happy you using the word guys. Right, a bit of an in-joke there. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so there's different perspectives, different paradigms, different disciplines that look at the same reality in different ways. So for us to conclude definitively what's happening is speculative. And we all ultimately choose a position, certainly. But for me, the issue is, what role did China in particular play in what's going on in the world at the moment? And also, I suppose, what is the role of organized religion, particularly Islam in its more, radical forms?
Yeah, well, you seem to explain that quite clearly, how that, when we're talking about the fundamentalists, where Islam is followed from the Hadith and the Quran to the T, where a lot of, in fact, the majority of Westernized Muslims don't believe in that kind of a traditional following of the Quran. And yet, what you pointed out was these were Islamists, not just Muslims, whereas there's a lot of people might not differentiate, and that's the danger of the propaganda that these bastards are putting up, because they're desperate for us to fight with each other and not look at what these people are doing. Then they're trying to say, no, as I said, the Jews and the Muslims on some level, they get on because they're both waiting for the same Messiah. They're waiting for an earthly Messiah, somebody who's going to come out of a crowd somewhere. But the Muslims said Jesus is going to be that. We can't have it all the same way. We need one fundamental way of understanding this. And as I've said many a times, Alex, when I read the Bible, I understood, because I'd studied religions, because since my dad was killed, I'd looked for what was happening, what happens after this life. Mediumship and things like that were the closest I got to spiritual. But it never changed my life. But when I understood that, when I read the Bible, how it goes against Catholicism, Church of England, Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Sikhism, you name it, the Bible says no to them all. So we have got, for me, a fundamental truth, because everybody disagrees. Well, if men are disagreeing with it and you ask them why, and the remarks have no bearing, no evidence, it's just a belief. Well, it doesn't mean anything, that, Alex, because we could be Jedis. We can believe in the Force, mate, and we can do that. So if it's a belief, and it's no good to me, because what people say to me is, when I read the Bible, that's what you believe. Well, I'm not. I don't just believe in things, Alex. I look for truth, and I look for evidence, and I see how this evidence stacks up. We're seeing archaeology catching up with the Bible now. We're seeing all this stuff that's coming out, all the traits. We've got the Board of Peace that's been announced. Tony Blair's just been put on a Board of Peace, mate. Now, these are 10 people who haven't got nations, and they're going to have some amount of control. We see this in the Bible, don't we? Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, just going back to what you were saying about the Jews, their understanding of Messiah has largely been shaped as being a prophet like Moses. That's where the problem is, because Moses was this person who freed them from slavery, from oppressive secular power. And that's the paradigm that existed at the time of Jesus, that Messiah was going to come and sort the Romans out. So he was warlike. This is the whole point that we mentioned over and over again. Now, the Essenes at Qumran, they basically had a more sophisticated understanding of Messiah. There is an amalgamation of a prophet, maybe like Moses, a priest, like the Levitical priests, so connected with the sacrificial system, and a king, because the people had asked for for a king when God said no. So God himself comes as a king. In our understanding of Messiah from a Christian point of view, Jesus fulfills the role as Messiah of prophet, priest, and king, whereas a lot of the Jewish understanding remained as a prophet like Moses, which has this idea of power. This is why Israel continues to trust and make pacts with other nations, which God said in genuine Israelite religion, don't trust these other nations, these other powers for protection, because that is selling out on me. That's what all the kings in Kings, Chronicles, and Samuel were judged for, particularly Kings and Chronicles. They were judged for doing precisely that. So they're still doing it. They're still doing it. This is a problem. The other thing that you talked about with scripture, in particular, and beliefs, one of the problems we've got today is a problem of language, which people kind of don't understand. But in the early 20th century, there was a movement that was prevalent, and it's called structuralism, and it got replaced by post-structuralism. And structuralism believes that words are like boxes, and words are boxes that contain meaning. So meaning is found inside the box. So imagine getting a present, a box, right? You take the lid off and you go, oh, look, I found the meaning inside the box. That understanding is what most people's view of meaning is when in relation to language. But post-structuralism makes it really clear that that's an impoverished view. And we can tell in scripture as well, God spoke existence into being. God said, let there be light, and there was light. So it wasn't he spoke a word and there was some truth inside it. Jesus didn't say, I'm speaking some words and there's truth inside it. He said, I am the truth. So the word of God is a spoken word. It's not a meaning that's contained inside. And as soon as you have an idea, which most people have, that it's a meaning inside a word, people start redefining the words. You see it in the Christian mysticism group. They maintain an external Christian veneer of language, but they totally change the meanings and rewrite them. Now, our friend, who we highly esteem, Donna Lee, posted a couple of days ago about something like this, rewriting the Genesis account, basically, the Genesis 2 and 3, and the fall of man and woman, and basically talking about the woman as a Kenegdo, this partner, but he was redefining it and saying, not just the rib. The woman's not just the rib. She's the whole side of the man. So the two equal and opposite parts. And originally, Adam didn't mean man. It meant human being. But it didn't. So what happens is they redefine, right, the shape of the words. And then they go, no, Asa Kenegdo actually means this. Or this Hebrew phrase actually means this. Because the meaning is inside the box. But the meaning isn't inside the box. The meaning is the totality of all of it. So when you talk about the word, I don't believe these beliefs. When I read the word, what does it say? And that's actually a profound thing, Paul. Most people just go, what does he mean by that? Well, it's the point that most people view language structurally, like there's a meaning inside the word. We've got to dig it out. No, it's there. God spoke his word, and that is power. As soon as you start tinkering and saying, no, there's a meaning inside this box, then it's, well, I think it means this.
It's also when you go to the Hebrew is phrase-based language rather than word-based like ours. We have so many words for definitions that we want to take a generalization, and we have to bring it right down to laser point each word. So it's like in Hebrew we would say Satan did this. We wouldn't say the Satan, but Hebrews calls for the Satan the Satans. But it wouldn't be like, well, the Alex said this or the Paul said that. Our language doesn't fit, our language doesn't use things like that. Whereas the Hebrew seems to be more of a communication basis on phrase, not just metaphor, because they can use the same words for metaphor as well as for actual definition. And I think if you keep it simple, that you can use a lexicon and you can go through that, when you see the selection of English words, you can see what's interchangeable. You know, there's a big thing about where King James, when he didn't want government, he wanted authorities, whereas some translations say government. Well, that means everybody's looking at him, and he didn't want them to look at him. But when you see authorities and government, they all mean the same thing. So it's not changing the context of that verse. And that is the precarious thing that I was worried about. I needed the best English translation that I could find, one that I could trust in, one that hasn't had so much change and has had things taken out. And I would, you know, I put the NIV next to the KJV, and I know which one has got the word of God in it. The NIV is straight in the bin. I don't know how many times we've got to say it on here. You use a lexicon to find out what these translations are saying. And when we say, like the New King James, oh, it's just the English words have just been modernized, they've been updated, you know, a lot of Bibles like Jesus was hanging 10 on Galilee and things like that. I just want the English words that was the word of God. Is that the word of God? Did it change? Did it mean anything? Does it go against everything? Yes. So let's go with what the scriptures say and not what the traditions. A simple one, what we've brought up many a times, Alex. Lucifer, son of the morning. Hillel ben Shakar. Shakar is the morning, the dawn. And Lucifer, shining one, is the son of that Shakar. Let's find out who Shakar is. Let's go into the myths. Let's go into the Ugaritic texts and find out what is said of Shakar, what is said of El, what is said of Shakar's sons. You know, we've got to be more open to get to the meat and potatoes. The milk is perfect, Alex. If you pick the Bible up and only understand that Jesus is the only Saviour that you can have, He's the only way out of it, and you pray to the Father through God, you're not going to go wrong. But that's not in my nature to just be happy with that. I need to know the ins and outs. I need to know that I'm right, not because I want to be right, but because I want the truth. You know, I've seen it in a lot of groups that are, you know, the secular groups that are talking about council tax and things like that. You've got people who are, they're either paid, Alex, or they're really stupid people who go into these groups to try and cause hassle. And I don't think all of them are paid, but I think some of us are certainly shilling. But when you are being called names with no evidence being produced to say this is why you're wrong, you know what you're up against. You know what you're up against, and it shows them up for who they are. Once upon a time, I would have got dragged into that, mate. You know, 10 years ago, I'd have still been battering my keyboard. You know, we've got to understand, not all these people can be humble enough to say, hey, I don't understand that. Will you show me what you mean? It's always, you don't know what you're talking about, and I've done it. This lad even went on to say, I used to believe all that free man of the land crap. You've known me nearly 15 years, Alex. Have you ever known me be involved with free man of the land stuff? No. So this is the stupidity of it. And you know, it's like, if the Bible is the truth and you're arguing that the Bible's corrupt, are you doing it to win an argument, or are you doing it because you truly believe that your religion beats what the Bible says? Because those are Christian religions sometimes that are arguing with each other. Jesus was a God. No, he wasn't. He was God. It's that simple. You can change a line. You know, I think it was Charles Taze Russell that said that if somebody read the Bible for 2 years without reading it through the watchtower, you'd be lost within 2 years. And people believe this, Alex. And people believe that, hey, don't worry, before it kicks off, all you Christians, you'll be gone. Your pants will come floating down out the air and they'll go, where's Dave gone? He was sat here a minute ago. Not going to happen. So people have got to start to pay attention, but there's so many people. I know people who've got holidays booked for this year and next year. I'm not that confident, me, mate. They're on about, I don't know if you saw it, but they're on about taking diesel pumps off forecourts from April.
Right.
So there's a lot of changes coming. They said that 2026 was going to be a year of changes. Well, we're already starting to hear about vaccines and jabs and things like that again. But the interesting thing over here, again, is this part of the plan. We know that Farage and Trump love each other, but now Farage has took on Zadawi from the Conservative Party. Zadawi wanted to mandatory vaccinate primary school children during COVID. Back in 2014, he wanted open borders because we need the immigrants. Reform is saying we're going to shut the borders. We're going to deport these immigrants. They're not going to do this. Was this? Why should we believe this? Robert Jenrick gets sacked by the Conservatives by tea time. He's a reform minister. Lammy is now wobbling. Is he going to become a reform minister this week? We're seeing interchangeable characters to a party that everybody's going to look to because they know the other two parties are corrupt. But we're just seeing it fill up with corrupt people who are going to say the right things and carry on with the same. Again, today there's an article that Keir Starmer could be gone by the end of the month. It doesn't matter, Alex. The Labour manifesto is still in place. That's still in play. It doesn't matter who we look at.
Yeah, well, I think they're walking a fine line reform, because when you start, I mean, it's not even about the track record of Zahawi and Jenrick. It's hard because obviously Farage, every time somebody defects and they're a high-profile figure, in some ways, it does undermine the party that they've left from. If anyone left from Labour, that'd be a bit more spectacular, because Reform are already considered to be the new Tory party or Tory light or whatever. So he has to be very careful, but I think he's already appointed too many people who are not part of the original Reform movement, which it speaks to them being co-opted. It speaks to a certain form of mainstream shift, whereas they were stood outside of the mainstream. As soon as they start to get some traction and they're at the head of the polls, it's like they're starting to morph much more like to a different version of the same old. So it doesn't look very promising what's happening with Reform. It's not the same as with Trump. There are big differences, because
exactly.
The UK is a small player. The UK is a very small player. Europe is a relatively insignificant player in world affairs now. It's Russia, America, and China. They're the big boys, and that's why Blair and co was so wanting to get the EU reunited. This is why Starmer is doing everything to drag us back in at all costs, as close as possible, because they're all panicking now in Europe. And when Trump, pulls out of NATO, or a lot of European countries in NATO, it's going to force countries to adopt their own position with respect to these big issues, like what do we do about Putin, and it's putting them in a difficult position, and they don't know what to do because they've relied on America for so long, and Trump's just saying, yeah, that's not happening anymore. So actually, Trump doesn't have to do that much to upset the apple cart. As soon as he changes the position, because Biden and co and all those before, they wanted everybody else as stooges supporting them in name only, but Trump doesn't need that now. So what do these stooges do? There's no role for them. They're starting to look as irrelevant as they are, because they were sort of hiding under the wings of the big bald eagle, which was America. So they don't know where they fit in now. So to me, they've been caught asleep with the pants down, Europe and the UK, and everyone's now trying to shift allegiance. It's happening within politics, within national politics. People are jumping parties, jumping ship. There's a massive realignment going on. There's massive tectonic plate shifts. And the same is happening geopolitically. And I think that Trump with Greenland, he's kind of posturing. He's stirring the pot, and he's kind of saying, he's a master of getting reaction from people. When people have been asleep and dozy for a long time, they just follow the status quo. And it's the same, not just with individuals, but with countries. They just get complacent. So he's just shaking up a hornet's nest, and actually he doesn't even have to do anything. He's just making them think of it. Like he could threaten to do something with no intent to do it, actually, but just to shake them up and see what they do, see what the position is. He's like smoking them out. So he's got a big advantage at the moment, Trump, where he doesn't have to do very much to get a really big reaction from people. And he can just sit back and watch what people do. So a lot of it's just posturing for me. You look like you're thinking like you're on Mastermind, Paul. Oh, hey, oh, there we go. I was wondering what was happening then. I remember being here a few weeks back. Don't know how many people are watching at the moment, but he was having some problems earlier, was Paul, with his tech. Every time he wanted to show a video, it was freezing. So here we are again. I'm hoping he gets back on. So we were talking about geopolitics, and I think the position of China is going to be very interesting, like I said earlier. And really, we're all really just taking a big stab in the dark. And I think Trump, like I said, he knows now he's got a lot of leverage. And he can just do whatever he wants. And it's even more interesting if he doesn't. If he postures and he positions, because he's forcing these people who had a very fixed position, like Europe's had a fixed position, to reevaluate the policy on everything. And it's the same like with Germany's position on nuclear power. Oh, we'll just take this position because the global energy market's like this. And so Trump's putting tariffs on everything and he's shaking everything up. Nobody really knows what the rules of the game are anymore. So before people develop a position about Trump, that he's sinister or he's a hero, he's a savior of the world, which is a very polarized view, I think it's best to see him as a tactician and a strategist. He's come in with a plan. He learned from the first 4 years, regardless of what you think about the Q operation being bigger than just Trump. He himself, as a shrewd operator, understands now that this second term, he's got a lot of clout, a lot of power, a lot of scope, and he doesn't even have to do very much. He can provoke reactions by doing outrageous things. And because nobody can judge, it looks so outrageous, people are going, he can't really mean this, can he? Well, so he's just gone and done a kind of a coup in Venezuela, and now he's talking about, basically taking Greenland's resources and justifying it by saying, well, if we don't do that, China, Russia, they could do it. He's painting a picture of a world that's fomenting with a lot of change, with a lot of operators. And he isn't even portraying, from the beginning, he has not portrayed Putin or Xi Jinping. He's not portrayed them as like hostile forces, which was happening all the time before. He sees them as competitors. He talks about them as competitors, but he doesn't malign them. And that's why at first people were saying, oh yeah, he's like a Putin puppet. It's a bit difficult to argue that Trump is a Putin puppet. They do that with a more minor character like Farage, so that the people who don't like Farage reform or whatever, or they died in the wool lefties, they'll say, oh yeah, Farage is a Russian asset. They've tried it in America, but it's less credible. It's less credible to do that because Trump's such a big figure, and the United States is such a big player still. So overall, we're looking at a massive upheaval. And in some ways, Trump reminds me of a trickster character. I don't know how much I've spoken about tricksters before. I think I've spoken about them in passing, but in Norse myth, you had Loki, who was a trickster. And in Greek mythology, Hermes, who became Mercury in the Roman pantheon, he was a trickster as well. And tricksters are also tending to be shapeshifters. This is why I concluded that the serpent in the Garden of Eden story in Genesis originally had legs and was cursed and had his legs taken away, so he was crawling on his belly over the earth. That speaks not just of a curse from God, but of a shape-shifting thing. So as a trickster, did God really say? You know, he's like a character in the Fast Show. He's a little bit whoa, he's a little bit away. And it's, yeah, so there's something about tricksters. What tricksters do, and if you look at Norse myth, Loki was a bit neutral. And in Greek, with Hermes, he was androgynous, neither male nor female, right? Not in one camp or the other. Not really clear where the line is. So what a trickster will do, morality, laws, black and white, disappear. Tricksters operate in the grey. And what tricksters, the role that tricksters perform in the myths is precisely to say, well, you know, all you moralists, you think the moral line is here and that everything on this side is wrong and everything on this side is right. So when the trickster comes in, they get rid of the black and white categories and they go, you know, it's in the grey here. What that does, it destabilizes everybody who thought that they understood where the lines were. Black and white, these are the laws, these are the rules. And when you get, let's just call them normies. Most normies are normies because they don't ask any significant questions. They drift through life, they follow the rules, they follow the prescriptions that are laid out for them. Starts in education at school, teacher says, don't do this, don't do that, do this, you know, whatever. You'll get a gold star if you're the best behaved child. So the whole system of conformity through which people are trained, right from childhood upwards, through the schooling system and everything else, is very much a black and white moralistic system. And what a trickster does, a trickster problematizes the whole foundation of that. And Trump, for me, operates in classic trickster mode. And what he's doing is what he's doing with Urbai, because he's such a very significant figure in world spotlight, he's causing outrage by certain maneuvers. But then when you cause outrage in people, what are they going to do about it? When you react to something, there's only so many times you can react and get angry. Oh, I'm really angry. I'm really angry. And after about 2 years of being really angry, you go, I'm still really angry. And it's like, right. And your point is what? Oh, you've been angry for 2 years, have you? What are you going to do about it? So when you get these characters, they kind of, by doing the things that they do, there's only so much outrage that you can experience before you get like kind of like an outrage exhaustion, and you go, oh, I just seem to be outraged all the time because he's done all these things, but what's he actually done? So when it comes down to it, let's just say he hasn't done very much. Or it looked like it was going to be really radical, really terrible what he did. Everyone goes, oh, that's really terrible. And then afterwards, he can just wait, turn it around, and it turns out that it's not really terrible. It's a really good thing he's done. So this is where there's an overlap with what Taylor's been suggesting for a while about Q. Now, Taylor can't come on at the moment because I think Paul's got to authorise him coming on the show, and he's not here at the moment. I don't know what's going on with him, bless him. But yeah, so this is what Taylor's been getting at, that when you look at it that way, you don't have to polarise Trump either into being a really good, solid hero type character or a really bad, nefarious problem character. He can be this trickster in the middle who's constantly shaking up. And the good thing about that is, especially with countries, it's a bit different with individuals because we're a long way removed from any political operator. Like Keir Starmer can change policies, but it's not going to affect you straight away unless it's drastic, unless you start imprisoning people for tweets and you made that tweet. You're probably still, even though it's really bad what they're doing, you're probably not going to be affected directly too quickly. But with nation states, international diplomacy and so on, economic policies, it can have a rapid effect. So when he's pushing things around and pressing on people and increasing tariffs, it forces them very quickly to reevaluate their position with respect to America, but then they have to reevaluate their allegiances and alliances with all other partners, because if America withdraws, then these agents that have been dependent on America have got to develop new allegiances, stronger allegiances with other actors internationally. But all of that has a knock-on effect. So what you see is the world order is being shaken, and a lot of people are cagey. It's like betting on a horse in the Grand National. It was like 40 to 1, a bit risky betting on this. So people are hedging the bets, trying to see what's going on, keeping the powder dry as much as possible. So it's definitely a trickster role, I think, that that Trump is expressing. And now I'm thinking to myself, as Paul dropped off the face of the earth. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to ask if anybody has got any questions that they want to put in the chat, either about what I've said about Trump, the trickster, whatever, or any other questions, and we can field them and see if we can get a bit of dialogue going. Because I don't just want to. I did this a few weeks ago. I don't want to just waffle on, so I just waffled on off the top of my head. But it'd be interesting. Taylor's on. Taylor went to the building. Don't know how you managed to do that, mate, but
I didn't do anything. Webby must have added me.
Right, well, I don't know where he is then. He's got the capacity to add you still. So yeah, maybe he's just having a siesta, or he's wrestling some technical demons somewhere. So how are you doing, Taylor?
Doing all right. It's been cold over here. Holy crap,
Has it?
It's been cold. Oh yeah. Not as cold as in Minneapolis though. I know it's been like freezing over there, below freezing.
Right. Okay.
We don't get much snow around here, but to be fair, it sometimes feels like that. It's like if you just get some precipitation or precipitation, you get some snow.
Yeah. So obviously, Paul would normally be asking you at some point to fill us in with details, and he would have a particular take on what's going on in the world, and he'd sort of cue you and ask you a few questions. Now, to my eternal shame, I don't tend to follow much that's going on these days. I'm too busy in my life doing more interesting things. But that doesn't mean I don't have an opinion. It's just I'm probably not the person best qualified to ask the interesting questions because I'm not following it.
I mean, that's fair. That's understandable. I mean, like, this shit does get, pardon my language, this does get quite, how should we put it, quite exhausting, quite mentally exhausting when you follow it. So at the end of the day, it's just like you can choose to follow it or choose not to, or you can come back to it, because again, I've always said this is a movie, so you can drift off at certain parts and then come back. It's not like you'll be missing the bigger picture at the end of the day.
Yeah. So have you any specific thoughts at this time then? I mean, how would you read the most let's put it this way. What do you think the most significant development has been this week in terms of Trump's actions? Maybe it's Greenland, I don't know, but how do you see the most significant action perhaps that's been engaged in this week that's caught the news headlines?
Well, first off, before I get to any of that, I actually want to talk about a little bit about a theory that I didn't think of myself, but I think it's a really good theory for how this whole thing is going to go in terms of the operation and how the movie's going to go. So again, let me preface it by saying that this is not my theory. I did not come up with it, but I do agree with it. And basically, the short of it is that okay, so we're in this operation. We know that 75% or more of the Congress and the Senate, and even the Supreme Court, are fraudulently elected, right? Because 2020 aside, we've had so many fraudulent elections with so much dead voters and so much illegal immigrant voting, as well as other voting frauds through places like through Dominion and such, through places like Venezuela and China. So the thing is, it's just like, then you have Trump going and this is all optically speaking, of course, trying to pass certain legislations. But every single time that he says that he's going to say, every time he says something like, this is going to happen within a week, this is going to happen within this date, but then the Congress blocks him. The Democrats will go and block it, or some rhino Republicans try to block it. So this is the optics that are being laid at the moment, and this what I find to be really interesting in this where the series is going is the idea that in order to really bring the people together, because as we know, so much of the public is still suffering Trump derangement syndrome and all that stuff, is that what if when 2020 comes out, because we know that's coming soon, is that Trump reveals that not only Trump comes out and says not only was 2020 a fraud, but we discovered that every single election for the last several cycles, let's say for argument's sake, since 2018, has all been fraudulent. And then Trump says, in order to, and since that means that I was also elected fraudulently, so I'm going to step down, and we are going to have a continuity of government situation, which we've already been under, but again, this is all optics. So, and then have a referendum, have a exposure of the fraud, and then have new elections, which to change all of these these wrongfully suited senators and congressmen and people in the House, and to get basically just the military will run things, and then they'll have a new election to get a new commander in chief. Most likely Trump, of course, Trump would easily win that, and then we would get the official end of the United States corporation that has been in, as I'm sure you guys all know, we've had since 1871. And so this would be the optical official end to the corporation and putting us back in a proper government. That's the theory that I've seen running around, and I think that it's a pretty good one, considering the fact that in order to expose all this election fraud, you can't have it come out and be like, oh, Trump is just being vindictive against his enemies, right? You have to you have to unite the people, and I feel like this would be the best way to do it, because at the end of the day, it's like even the Trump derangement syndrome people, I feel like would be happy. I mean, would honor Trump with the idea is like, oh, he really cares about the country, and he says I was elected fraudulently as well, so I'm going to step down.
Yeah, it's a really, really good suggestion, actually, and that actually would make a lot of sense. Can you see on the comments, Taylor, the second comment from Ned O'Kelly? I know who this person is, but I'm gonna maintain his dignity. The rise of BRICS and the US's move away from Europe has got the globalists panicking. Sovereign peoples of all nations need to rise up with right ideas to reshape their political establishments. So would you endorse that, Taylor, in the sense that Trump would do this, but it could have a domino effect on all these other countries who then might say, actually, we need to follow that lead, and we now need to do something about our own leadership?
Yeah, pretty much, because as the dominoes fall with the United States, it usually affects things it pretty much always will affect things worldwide, but in particular in the Western world. And before I forget to mention this, you were talking about the UK before, and
yeah,
this is another thing that I really just realized is that you guys right now in the UK, and not just you guys in the UK, but also in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, your guys are all basically going through your own Joe Biden phase. Basically, essentially, so I'll give an example with Canada. With Canada, Trump was constantly getting on Trudeau, was constantly attacking him, was constantly making him look like the complete fool that he is. But with Nigel Farage, I mean, why am I saying Nigel Farage? My bad. With Mark Carney, he hasn't really said much. He hasn't really been attacking him at all. He's just basically been kind of neutral and only responding to certain actions like trade negotiations and all that stuff. And so it's the same thing with what's his name in the UK? I keep forgetting your prime minister's name.
Starmer,
yeah, Keir Starmer. And also again in Australia and New Zealand. And you guys are really going through that optical phase of make everything so extreme, so over the top leftist, communist, socialist agenda that it pisses the people off so much that they want reform, and to give them a simulated version of what was actually planned for them. Because one thing to keep in mind is that everything that we're seeing going on around the world, it's all already happened. What we're seeing right now is the public replay of the events. It's the public rollout of the events for the normies. I think because, like, at the end of the day, this Venezuela thing, we know that, for example, the Venezuela thing, Maduro, we already know Maduro was brought under submission back in 2020 via that court case that happened. So that whole thing has already been. So that's a perfect example. When it comes to Russia and China, we know that Trump has been working with Xi and Putin this whole time in order to defeat the New World Order. So that's along with other countries, of course. So that's another thing. But yeah, it's essentially what I'm saying is that you guys are also going through your version of Biden, because you have people like Keir Starmer putting people in jail for thought crimes on the internet and all that stuff. You have Mark Carney in Canada, who's turning Canada into an openly socialist country. Australia, New Zealand, etc. It's really the optical phase of you guys going through that same thing that we went through from 2021 to 2024. Piss the people off enough so that they'll want change, and so that they will themselves want reform and to elect proper leaders that will actually do the things that they that need to be done. Now, will it take as long as it did for us with fake Biden? I'm hoping not, but at the end of the day, there's I know it's understandably frustrating, but the more that this more over the top nonsense that you see from the media, like locking people up for thought crimes, or declaring or wanting to fight Ukraine without the United States, or even worse, wanting to fight against the United States over the Greenland thing, this optical over the top nonsense.
Yeah,
it's all for the purpose of swaying the public.
So do you think then, when Starmer and Co are trying to get X banned in the UK, because of a few issues to do with Grok as well as X, and then they're setting up Elon Musk as some sort of clear and present danger to democracy or whatever, the rule of law, as Keir Starmer would have it. Do you think that's an example of precisely that actually Musk has liberated X in the sense that free speech is possible again, and that's why Starmer and Co are trying to shut it down? So this is an expression of the same thing.
Well, as we know, Jack Dorsey? I think Jack Dorsey. He was attacked by Q many times openly, saying that we're coming after Twitter, and we know that Elon Musk is Elon Musk. So, under Executive Order 13818, they used his money. They seized him and his money, and they bought Twitter, and that ended up being one of the greatest weapons in this in this fifth generation warfare operation, because X, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is probably the biggest social media weapon in the whole world, other than maybe YouTube. And so you have these other countries like the UK, and I think even maybe China, I don't remember, are trying to they're quote unquote trying to ban X. But you know what? It's just like I've said before. Controversy creates conversation. You say all this crazy stuff, you piss the people off, and you get them more and more wanting change. It's just like what's happening with us with the Epstein files and the Somali immigration fraud. All this stuff. It's like people are saying, "Oh, this is all brand new." No, this is stuff that's all been happening for years. Like all this massive illegal immigration, for example. This has been this all happened a decade or two ago, and now same with the Somali fraud. This is all just coming out now for the public to piss them off and get them to want change. And it's the same thing for over there in the UK with it's like, what do you think is going to happen to the public when you tell them we're thinking about banning Twitter because we don't like
exactly.
It pisses them off.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at Kev James's comment there in the chat, so Trump playing the trickster role, which is what I talked about, is him bringing in Tony Blair to be part of the Gaza peace plan, and that's been done to expose him. Now, I'm not sure if that's a part. If he's playing a trickster role, interesting. It's an interesting take that Kev's got there, suggesting that perhaps him inviting Tony Blair, who everybody sees as this war criminal, is Trump doing something there to expose Blair? It's an interesting one. What's your take on that?
As far as Tony Blair goes, I very highly doubt that man is still around. It's most likely a 2.0, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that you keep these people in the spotlight, and they've been doing that with the Clintons and the Obamas and Bushes as well. You keep these people, you keep these war criminals, these degenerates, pedosexuals, in the spotlight, so that way that when the arrests happen, it's just like, this guy's actually still relevant. This isn't like a Jimmy Carter situation where Jimmy Carter wasn't relevant for decades, so nobody cares. It's like you keep these people in the spotlight so that when the arrests do come, people will be like, yes, get this guy, kind of thing. Because people haven't really cared about Tony Blair, for example, Tony Blair, since the Iraq War days, really. So, you have to keep these guys in the public mind. It's just like Marco Rubio. It's like that's clearly not the real Marco Rubio. The real one was a hardcore Zionist neocon who Trump ran against in 2016. So it's just another example of keep these people in the public eye, so that way that they care when the arrests happen, whenever that happens. Hopefully, very soon.
So have you seen the latest comment that Jerry says about so the fake Elon then fell out with Trump? Now, see what I'm reading here between the lines is the Q situation people talk about. People tend to have polarized views. They either think it's all hogwash or it's absolutely on the money. But the issue about clones, masks, and so on seems to be something that crops up for people time and time again. And the reason for that is because it sounds like if the story might break down somewhere, we can just quickly sort of repatriate that actor as not really who they are. So when we look at the role of either masks or Guantanamo or whatever, what can we answer if somebody persistently says, well, I'm not buying into this mask or replacement theory because it just sounds a little bit too neat?
Okay, well, the best answer to that is, well, first of all, actually, let me preface this by saying that if they're coming at this from an emotionally charged standpoint, then I have no response to them, because I don't like wasting my time with emotionally charged arguments, because you're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to be an argument. But if you're just genuinely curious, the answer to that is, well, first of all, look at the best example I would say. Look at Biden. We know clearly that Biden was not the real Joe Biden. And if you want a showcase of that, I literally have a whole 1.5 hour video presentation, not by me, by somebody else, fully proving definitively that was not the real Joe Biden in the White House for 4 years. So then the logical extension is this: if they can fake the president of the United States, if they can have a dude in a mask in there playing the role of Biden for 4 years, what can they not do? That's the logical extension. Then you see all these other people. You look at the necklines, like on Elon Musk or on Nancy Pelosi. You see people that look younger than they are. Their neckline, you see them. Their facial features look younger. Their height is different, et cetera, et cetera. It can be a little difficult at first, but if you just look at before and after pictures of certain people from certain years, you clearly tell that this is not the same person. So at the end of the day, I don't really like to get into the argument too much of who's replaced, who's under submission, and yada, 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 because Q said that both were being used. Not everyone will be replaced. Many will just be placed under submission and will do as told. And I should also mention this as well. that a lot of these people are. It's not so black and white. A lot of these people in the media and even politicians, I like to call them gray hats, as in like they'll follow whoever pays them the most money. So, like for example, you have certain Hollywood people who are not exactly into the pedophilia, into the child sex stuff and all that, into the Satanism, but they have to go along with it because otherwise their careers will be ruined. So that's what we would call a gray hat. So a lot of these people could actually be the real people, but just under submission. It really just depends. Certain ones, it's pretty obvious it's not the real person just because of how evil they actually are, and just by looking at their facial structures and stuff. I mean, we can even tell that there's multiple versions of Trump himself. You know, you have a 6-0 Trump, you have a 5-7 Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, you have all these. Same thing with his wife Melania. Same thing with his kids. So, you know, there's a lot of trickery going on. But at the same time, it's not really the most important thing to harp about who's real and who's not, because that's just something you can argue forever.
I get that. The problem is, though, if we make a claim that somebody is, it's us making a claim. So we can't say that people contesting the claim are more of a problem than the person making the claim. So if we're going to give an account for a situation and analysis, it's kind of sloppy to just say they're a clone, they're a replacement, they're this. So this isn't a criticism. I'm just being dead straight about it. So even when you say the phrase Elon Musk, right? In theory, you could be suggested to be saying Elon Musk could have been replaced. But when it said as Elon Musk, it's implied that he has been replaced. So it's not plausible after the fact to say, well, I don't want to get into too much whether he has been replaced, because it's already been stated that it's Elon Musk. So we just need to be a bit careful with that. But I just wanted to move it on to another comment by Ned in the chat. I don't know how much you know about the Hamiltonian American system, Taylor, because I don't know all of your background on the theory. But he says, hi, Taylor, have not Rubio and J.D. Vance changed their positions and come round to Trump's fight to re-establish the Hamiltonian American system of political economy?
I don't really understand what that question is asking.
Right, okay, Ned, that's your cue. A brief description in the chat of what Hamiltonian system of political economy is.
I assume that I'm assuming. Okay, hold on. Let me answer that real quick. To Kev James' comment. Well, yeah, that's the whole point. It's to piss you off. That's the whole point. You piss people off, and you demand change. Again, controversy breeds discussion. That's why you have all these things going on. Like, say, for example, Trump, quote unquote, pardoning Netanyahu. You know, it gets people talking. That's just the simple bit of it. It's like, and you have to remember that again, that this movie is to the whole purpose at this point is to wake up the normies. It's to get them to want change for themselves, because as you and Webby have said many times, you can try to sit there and convince a normie that 9/11 was not done by 19 dudes hijackers with box cutters and a guy in Afghanistan. Or Kennedy was not just shot by a lone gunman from the wrong, from a direction he clearly wasn't shot at, et cetera, et cetera. Or that the mask mandates for COVID were nonsense, like, et cetera, et cetera. You can tell people that stuff as much as you want, but it doesn't matter. The point is that you have to you have to make people want to have change themselves. And it's the same thing that's going on in Minneapolis right now. You have all this over the top protests, but as we've seen over the last year in 2025, 2025 was really about exposing the NGOs, exposing George Soros, exposing all these hidden hands that have been funding all of these color revolutions and mass protests over the years. Now it's pretty much common knowledge, at least among sane people, not the hardcore lefties, but among sane people, that these protesters are being funded. And the question is, by who? Well, that's mainly been answered at this point. And now we have the Somali daycare fraud. So you could. So basically, my point is that you see the results of when you focus on these things that piss people off. They want resolution, they demand it, and eventually we do get it.
Okay. So, Paul, are you with us? Earth calling Mr. Webster. Well, he appears to be with us, but he's not. I don't think he's become a mute. Have you become a mute, Paul?
His mic is probably not working or something.
Right. So I've asked Alan to answer in the chat. Right. Here we go.
Well, I should also mention this, that when it comes to the end of this operation, I don't want people to sit there and get confused and think that all you have to do is hit an off switch and this whole operation ends and everything is different. Because it's not going to be, it's most likely not going to be like that. It's going to be more of a dimmer switch. You know how you can slowly turn on, have a light slowly turn off and on, like the light going in and out slowly. It's most likely going to be like that. As in, because first of all, we have to get to the EBS, most likely. We need to get to the election fraud. Then we need to get to the domain systems. Then we need to get to the NGOs and the chemtrails. We need to get to the financial system. The financial system has to change. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen. The arrests, etc.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot that still needs to happen. So it's not going to just be an on and off switch, basically.
So the point that Ned's made here is about.
Oh no, I know who Alexander Hamilton is. I know who he is. He was a British agent. He was he was working for the Crown. He was the one responsible for implementing the first bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve of its day, essentially.
Right. So I think the idea that Alan's getting at is about the reindustrialization. Like how under globalism, a lot of American companies were gutted, and a lot of stuff went out to the so-called third world for cheaper labor. There's the globalist model. Trump seems to be re-establishing the industrial and rebuilding the industrial centers of America. So it would suggest that Ned is suggesting that Vance has come on board and is realigned really with this vision, and that this is what Trump is in fact doing.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's just like the whole idea is obviously you want everything to return over here to the United States. I mean,
yeah,
you can't have a country that's sustained through foreign imported labor. And I should also mention that the second reason why the globalists and the New World Order people wanted to import people so much, it's not just for the easy labor, but it's also just to be able to buy voters. You import all of these people from you blow up the third world. You bring them over, you pay them to come over here. You give them visas and you give them easy access to healthcare and stuff, and you give them even the ability to vote, driver's licenses, etc. So you basically pay them to vote for you. It's like vote Democrat. So that way, because the Republicans will kick you out. It's kind of like what they did with the black voters for decades. It's like keep voting for us, and we'll make your community better. But as the decades have gone on, recently blacks have realized, hey, look, the Democrats we've been voting Democrat for like 60 years, and it hasn't helped us at all. So we're gonna stop doing that. We're gonna vote independent or Republican. But so then they decided, hey, we'll just buy the illegal immigrant vote then.
Yeah. So there's a section.
Anybody hear me?
I hear you.
No. Who are you?
I didn't think you could.
You disappeared. You disappeared, Paul. You abandoned us. We're in crisis.
What an absolute load of bollocks. I could hear you. I was talking, but for some reason it wouldn't recognise the mic, so I've had to come out and come back in. But listening to it, it's bringing a lot of interesting questions up, because Tony Blair being put there to, whether he is being put there to be exposed or not, this board of 10 people does fit rather well with what is in Scripture, which talks about these heads of 10 nations, these 10 crowns. We're going to see a little crown come up from somewhere. Taylor mentioned whether Trump might step down and somebody else might take this forward. I think we're very much in that kind of mindset at the moment, because Tony Blair's very WEF, very Davos, all that kind of stuff, as is Starmer. We're still all looking for this WEF. Taylor says that this is Trump against the WEF, and yet we're seeing all these things all work together for each other mutually. And it's interesting to see, because I think Taylor again mentioned last week that Trump and China these are all working together. Putin's a good guy; he's working with it, but we are meant to see adversarial positions. When we come back to our own country, we've just seen reform. I think it's just shat on its own doorstep, if I'm being honest, to take in people what they've taken in who have been pro absolutely what reform are meant to be against. So when I said to my mate, I said, so would you contemplate voting reform then because of their immigration policy and stuff? He says, yeah. He says, because there's nobody else even talking about doing anything. And when I showed him who this minister was who wanted to mandatory vaccinate primary school children, when we were even hearing from the so-called science that they weren't the people who were at risk. But 10 years ago, he's promoting open borders. Well, that's not going to fit in line with deporting immigrants. And as Taylor said again, we don't just get them in here for things like that. The change in the demographic of our country, this is now a government policy to allow these people to come in, to then give them asylum, but then give them everything that the people of the home nation can't get. This pits us against them. Then it's Muslims against Christians. Then it's Muslims against this. And we know good Muslim friends of ours who don't follow what Islamists follow. So we've got this melting pot when we can't even control our own borders, and we're an island. You know, one of the great things about this country was because we've got these borders. When we became this, the sun never set on the British nation. When we became that, there was nobody coming invading us anymore. The Vikings could possibly do it in longboats again now, because nobody's patrolling, nobody cares. King Charles says that he's the king of a Christian country. Yeah, he's just been promoting Dawali. He's just promoted Eid. He does everything like what the Christian schools do, the multi-faith. Should we teach more about Jesus? No. Let's just teach about all the ways that go to God. Then the Vatican comes along and says, yeah, all roads lead to God. And I'm shouting, is anybody reading this book? This book that's meant to be the word of God. You're all saying that you follow this, but you clearly don't. So again, we come back to these foundations. That's got to be the foundation. What are we getting out of that? What we are seeing in the world? Who's going forward to conquer at the minute? Who's going to be given the power of these nations? Iran now. It's gone totally again. There was riots in London yesterday. The footage I've seen, Alex, it seems to show that the police actually provoked all this. Some guys climbed up on the Iranian embassy and took the Islamic Republic flag down and put up the Persian, the actual regime from all those years ago. You've got all these people talking about how we're Persians, and they're even mentioning Cyrus, Alex. Now, there's the videos I've got here. We'll give them a go. We'll see if they work or not. But I want yours and Taylor's take on this, because we've been mentioning Netanyahu. Milakovsky as I don't know who put it in the group. I think it was Jerry who said that, spelt it out for me. But this is a European Ashkenazi Jew who was brought up in America, who are telling us these things. So let me just see. Let's just see if this works.
If you take away the Soviet Union and its chief the PLO, international terrorism would collapse.
Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change on this side, Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq.
Czechoslovakia and East Germany are obviously very important additional proxies.
A third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. Libya is, while no one is watching, the book is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb.
Supporting terrorism not only to every part of the Middle East, but to Venezuela. They're in cahoots with the Maduro regime.
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon?
The answer is categorically yes.
I said the West really doesn't understand militant Islam. So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center. The next thing you'll see is militant Islam is bringing.
So, what do you take on them? Taylor, do you want to go first?
It was hard to follow what he said.
Yeah, you're cutting out Webby, so.
Fill in, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't hear that very loud, so
It's as loud as it goes my end, mate.
no, I don't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Then what was the basic thing that he said, Paul? Just
Those felt like
Just
some
had-
old clips, by the way.
It's basically Netanyahu wrote the second video. Netanyahu wrote a book where he was saying that there was going to be Islamic terrorism, and it would get to a point where they could actually come and take down the trade center. Now, this is written well before. The other video talked about all the other countries that are all not against the way they operated, the likes of Libya and things like that, were always counter Israel. And he was saying that these are the countries that need to be taken out. Now, he's been talking about this for years. They're still talking about the same thing. If Netanyahu isn't Netanyahu, then what is it that's going to be exposed from this, Taylor? I mean, are they going to rip his mask off like Scooby-Doo, or are they going to?
No.
That's what I'm saying. Who is this Netanyahu that is still following the same? What do you call it? The same rhetoric. It's the same. So this plan has been in place for forever. Maybe that plan has now been hijacked. But how does the plan, the Q plan, bring Netanyahu out? How does this get exposed? Because I think it's getting really messy. Because and Alex made a point that we can't just say, oh, well, it's him in a mask, because Trump and Musk were like bum boys. Then they fell out. Then Trump only last week said about X because of what Starmer and them are doing. I mean, I think Grok has been used to put some of our politicians by AI into bikinis and give them women's bodies, and they're very upset about it. I don't know.
What the hell?
Yeah, well, it's very strange stuff that's going on. So then he's approached about something, Trump, and he says, oh, well, I'll have to get in touch with Elon and we'll sort something out. He's a good guy. And I thought, we're doing it again. Oh, no, we aren't. Oh, yes, we are. Oh, no, we're not. And I'm thinking, this is getting really tiring really quickly. And like I said, with Blur now coming into it, there's no lines here at the moment. They're all pissing in the same pot, but we're saying there's a plan about this somewhere, because if there isn't, then they're all in on this, and we just need to be able to shed light on where this goes.
yeah. I mean, I would also just come back as well to what Taylor said regarding Hamilton and, portraying that he was a problem. And Ned's come back on and said to read Hamilton's own writings, who was incidentally promoted by George Washington. Aaron Burr worked for the British Empire and was a traitor. Now, interestingly, I had a section here when I researched a bit on Hamilton. I just got it on Google Gemini. It's quite useful for the research. So it talks about this policy from Hamilton, which is support for domestic manufacturing involving tariffs and subsidies. So I'll just read this out quick. It says, in his report on manufactures in 1791, Hamilton argued that the US could never be truly independent if it relied on foreign nations for manufactured goods and military supplies. So he suggested protective tariffs, which is what Trump's obviously doing, high taxes on imported goods to make foreign products more expensive, encouraging Americans to buy domestic. He talks about bounties, which are subsidies, were direct government payments to infant industries like startups, we call them today, to help them get started. And thirdly, internal improvements, federal funding for infrastructure like roads and canals to connect the agricultural west and south with the industrial north. That's what China's had a lot of infrastructural development with the rail, with the train networks, and they've been developing the people, and they've been teaching them art and culture and developing the populace, because your populace are the biggest thing to invest in. There's been a brain drain in leftist settings where the people have been disempowered by government to maintain control over them, and it looks like on some levels they woke up to that in China. I'm not saying it's a perfect regime, it's still got oppressive dimensions, but they've tried to invest into infrastructure, particularly rail, and the skilling, and they use TikTok differently than we use it. They use it for educational purposes, whereas actually we're subverting our kids using TikTok. So it's a completely different expression within a culture. So it does seem as if this Hamiltonian doctrine that Trump conspicuously seems to have adopted is something that is about rebuilding infrastructure, funding startups, and high taxes, in terms of imports, so that people will buy American products. He seems to be creating a self-sustaining America again and reversing globalism in practice. Now, that seems to be something you'd agree with, Taylor, as part of Trump's strategy. He's clearly doing it, and that is Hamiltonian. So how do you then suggest that Hamilton was a traitor?
Okay, well, let me put it to you this way. Back in the days of the founding of the Republic, the common sentiment among pretty much every single one of the founding fathers was trying to make America a strong country, and to get it away from the British, not Rothschild, they weren't around at the time, but the Jewish-owned central bank of Europe, of Britain, and they each had different ideas of how to go about it. Hamilton. And by the way, I just want to mention the only reason why Washington took his advice over, I think it was John Adams, was because of the fact that Hamilton was a much more well-spoken fellow. He understood exactly how to get his point across and be able to convince people of stuff better than his adversaries did. But what he implemented was the first United States central bank, which was the Federal Reserve of its day. The first, and people think it started with Woodrow Wilson.
We're coming for you, Taylor.
Oh my God! No, I hope they're going for the illegals, bro. But continuing, so
when they came for the immigrants, he said nothing, Alex.
I'd be like,
then he'll be wearing blackface.
Yeah, let me get out the shovel and fight them like that one person did a few days ago, bro. The snow shovel. Even though we don't get much snow around here. Oh man. But continuing. So people think it started with Wilson in 1913, but it didn't. That was our third American central bank. The first one we had was really at the founding of the country in the 1700s. It was on a 20-year charter. It expired in 1813 or something like that, and and of course it led to the War of 1812, because the British were like, no, you can't let our central bank expire. And so we ended up getting the second one. That leads into the whole different conversation about the bank, where the point is Hamilton, while he was about making America strong, at the end of the day, he was also a British aligned agent as well. And he was the one responsible for the first central bank, which most of its shareholders were in London. So you can't exactly say that he was a purely America first guy. And also, I should mention that, and I mentioned this in the chat as well, that Aaron Burr, who was Thomas Jefferson's first vice president, he challenged him to a duel and killed him. And Aaron Burr gets a lot of fake BS said about him over the years, over the centuries. But just to go on top of that, pretty much all the founding fathers hated Hamilton. They thought that he was a prick. They thought that he was arrogant. They despised him. But politics are politics. So at the end of the day, it's just like you can only do so much. Man, men were men back then. Let me just say that men were men back then. They saw someone was evil, they took care of the bastard. But yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Is that the good Trump is all about bringing back on the domestic front. Obviously, you have to have to be a sovereign nation. You need to have your people be buying the products made domestically, not internationally. Otherwise, you're basically a province of another state or another country.
Seemingly, though, Taylor, that was Hamilton's proposal.
Yeah, on certain and certainly on certain fronts, absolutely. I mean, Hamilton was he was Washington's Treasury Secretary. So so there is that. I should also mention that Washington, by this time, he was, if I remember correctly, his health was not doing too well as well. He didn't last too long after leaving office, so it's unfortunate. He was a great man, though. Regardless, though, yes. So whether you want to call it a Hamiltonian idea or not, because remember that Trump likes to mention people and not just to genuinely exalt them, but also to bring them out into the spotlight. For example, he mentioned Teddy Roosevelt as well not too long ago. And we know how much of a POS warmonger that he was. So, everything that Trump says has a meaning, whether it's direct or indirect. So,
now I'm getting some interesting feedback here, because Ned's come on and said no, it wasn't a central bank; it was a national bank. Big difference. Now, when I went to Gemini, it said a national bank, the first bank of the United States. But then it says Hamilton championed the creation of a central bank modelled after the Bank of England.
Exactly. That's
which provided a stable national currency and acted as a safe place for federal tax revenue and provided credit to businesses. So it looks like it was a national bank modelled on the Bank of England, because obviously he'd had that background, but not central bank as we understand it in the contemporary sense, like a global institution, because that's what central banks are now. They're global spider webs, aren't they, that control nation states. This was a bank that was central, but not a central bank. It was a national bank.
It wasn't as powerful as the Fed. The thing about the first and the second central bank of the United States is that they essentially accomplish what the Fed does, but just on a much smaller scale, because at the time people were much less easily swayed back then. But when you have a central bank, or whatever you want to call it, a national bank, because remember, when they made the Fed, they called it, they were referring to it as a national bank as well, in order to get people on board. It's like you use certain language to get people to think that it's a good thing. Regardless, though, the thing about it is that...
Sorry for interrupting, Tel. What bank did you have before the Federal Reserve in 1913? What were they trying to put in? Because I know somebody in the chat room said Andrew Jackson killed the banks. He gave the republic back to the people. So what kind of a banking system did you have? Because I know we all know about the people who are against the central banking system as the Federal Reserve. We know that three of them were on the unsinkable ship known as the Titanic, that JP Morgan just so happened to decide he wasn't going on that day, on the day. So what kind of a banking system did you have? Because I know that Rothschild always said that if we don't have a central bank in America, there will be war, which is what we had. Now we talk about whether you won independence and whether we owe you money now because we're bankrupt. We went bang in 2000 a day. All our debts go through Wall Street. So people are shouting over here that if we have tariffs put on us by Trump, then we're having people say, well, we should dump the dollar. Well, if we dump the dollar, the pound is just so weak, it'll collapse us. We'll have to, and you as the dollar, you're trillions in debt. The only way you can do that is kill the banks. But it doesn't look like that's what he's doing. But you're saying that is in the future. So, it's something I'll keep my eye on.
That's
But
the thing about
it seems to all be fluffing together quite nicely. Go on, mate.
The thing about the banking situation is that this is something that, optically speaking, because if you ask me, this has already all been done behind the scenes, and that we're seeing the public rollout. I mean, we see silver going up in price day after day, week after week, and not to mention we also see like all these banks and stuff. If this was normal, this wasn't a movie, they would be complaining about this, but they're not. Which right now silver's I think at like $90 something an ounce or whatever, and
that's my whole point. Everybody seems to be making out of this. We've got things in Argentina now where legislation has been passed where if there's any fire damage, that land can now go up for sale. Whereas this is heritage land in Argentina. It's meant to be under protection. But if it burns, it can then be sold. So we're starting to see wildfires just happening, in Argentina. And they are pointing at Israel being the cause of that. We're seeing Israel being pointed at, being involved in all. Israel is being pointed at for what's happening with Iran, what's happened in the riots in London, what's happened with these shootings of the Muslims shooting Jews. Everybody's pointing at Israel. Now, if this is part of the plan, where does that fit in with exposure? Because all I can see is instead of showing us exposing something to us, I can see people being whipped up with wherever their mentalities are, whatever their understanding is, and however they can articulate it. I know we have seen it in America as well. We've seen it with these ICE agents. I've said to Alex, and I think I said it to you as well, Till, it's like a double-edged sword because they're trying to stop the ICE agents doing their job of getting illegals who have come into that country illegally, whether they're the ones who are like the Somalians ripping benefits and all that, but they're going after these immigrants. So there's people coming out and saying, don't do that, don't do all this kind of stuff. You're saying, no, that's got to be done because we've got to get the country back. Well, that is what Hitler said. And as I said, when they came for the immigrants, I said nothing. When they came for we seem to be repeating ourselves, but we seem to be doing it on a worldwide scale now. We've not got those nations where we could just send a telegram, or where you're going back to, it was a lad on a horse who'd run a horse until it was virtually dropping dead, get into another station, get another horse and deliver it. But now everybody's speaking the same language, everybody's on the same page, but they're fighting for control of a world order, whether it's the new world order, what you specify, Taylor, as being the Rothschild European International Bank of Settlements type, who are trying to impose the Chinese grid onto us particularly in England, digital ID. Oh yeah, we won't do that, but we'll keep building the infrastructure. So they keep testing, but it's all seemingly part of a really, really good plan that we seem to be watching play out. And you're right in the aspect of it being a movie. It's just I want to get hold of this script so I can start getting ahead of things. And the only script that I can see that is exposing it is what's saying it is in the Bible. So there is an order coming together, and it's an order that is going back from biblical times. It's the same bloodlines using all these different facets, and now they've got a chance to put it all in place. It'd be interesting, Taylor, if you've got anything about Greenland coming from Brzezinski in the Grand Chessboard. I don't know if Greenland has ever come up in that, because I have seen a lot of, going back like 100 years, that Greenland has been in the minds of America, Russia, China for a long time. And they were saying that the Chinese have built more icebreakers in a year than the Americans have built in years, decades, and they built more in a year. So there's something happening here. The religious side is being controlled, the financial side is being controlled, wars and rumours of wars. Have I missed anything out, Alec?
No, I mean, the thing is, we're a bit all over the place, but it's interesting. We're covering lots of ground. We're not probably doing it in a consistent way. We've got this interesting thing going on in the chat as well here. Ned's come back with a statement here about Trump is modelling himself openly on McKinley's administration. He was an American system promoter, Hamilton, and funnily enough was assassinated by the British. So here Ned is talking about the British Empire, the Crown. So I think, obviously, just in terms of the American Wars of Independence, and the whole thing was about, being free of the British Crown. So the argument seems to be coming here across from Ned that, we've thought for a while that America was this big global power, the moral policeman of the world, but it had actually been co-opted by globalists who'd taken control of it. And in fact, what Trump is doing is continuing the battle against the British Empire and the Crown, which is carried on beneath the surface, and was maybe trying to use America as a proxy. Now, that's a slightly different paradigmatic take, because, Taylor's regaled us with quite a bit of history there, and he's obviously knowledgeable. And then Ned has come from a different perspective, which also delves into history. Most people don't view these things historically. Sometimes we need to excavate the history. But even when we're excavating it here, there seems to be some overlap and some difference. And the difference seems to be that Trump is really a sleeper cell against the British Empire, which never really went away. Taylor's take is a little bit different, but there's definitely overlap, even in the Q operation. So, as Ned was saying, it would be good to have some extended discussion on that. So that's one aspect to this, the historical aspect of it, the whole thing with the bankers, the whole thing with the British Empire and that sort of struggle and what globalism is, which is affecting the whole, face of the earth. And then we've got these other issues, with Israel and the spiritual battles and the bigger, if you like, eschatological picture than just what I started with, which was international relations being a form of secular eschatology. Eschatology just means end times, but it's all about rise and fall of kingdoms, but in spiritual terms, and the final judgment, which is the ultimate fall of the satanic kingdom and the triumph of the Son of God. But in terms of international relations, it's this ongoing battle, no religion in view, the rise and fall of empires and great powers that's ongoing. And they rise and they last a while and they fall. So we've got various aspects of overlap. We've got political operators right across the board. We see heavy polarization in the West now between America, because Trump's taking it in a different direction, Europe and the UK. Putin's in the mix, and it's most polarized, looking at the different approach to foreign policy between Trump and the UK European axis. And definitely Starmer is aligning more with Europe as an ally, but he's trying to hedge his bets and also support Trump. So he supported Trump over Venezuela, really, in a way. And they're making noises about Greenland, and you know, he shouldn't be doing it. So everyone's having to play this really careful game on a geopolitical level. And then we've also got, Paul, this spiritual dimension, the biblical prophecies, the stuff around Israel, the jihadi sort of Islamist dimension, which is not the same as Muslims. We've got the migration issue affecting not just this country, but the whole of Western Europe. So it's a massive melting pot, which is psycho-spiritual, socio-spiritual, cultural. So it's extremely complicated. I don't think there's a single variable answer if you're analysing it broadly. But what you and me, Paul, come back to always is what is the cosmic battle, the as above, so below, because the spiritual battle always, you know, people talk about a battle for hearts and minds. A war is constantly raging to win hearts and minds of human beings, because even with the idea of the image of God in man, what it really means in the strictest sense is we are all agents and representatives. When we're aligned with God and we're in his image, we become proxies of God. So his kingdom is all about building according to his kingdom principles. And in Christ, that's love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. And when you look at the secular models that Jesus said, he who will be greatest among you will be servant of all. No matter which political paradigm you take, it's still competitive. It's still zero sum. It's still, I've won, and I know I've won because you've lost. So the basic frame of the world has not changed. It continues to be fallen. It continues to be competitive. It continues to lead to murder and all kinds of foul atrocities that exist, like Jesus said, in the hearts of men. So we still need a solution that deals with the heart of man. No political system deals with that, and not all religious systems do either. So this is operating on several different levels, but there's a cosmic battle between what's happening up, if you like, in the above, in the heavens, and what's reflected on the earth.
Yeah. I think when we were talking about fractals of realities, each and every one of us are vibrating at whatever frequency we vibrate at due to the information that we take in and the discernment that we use. The difference that I found from being, when I was born again and understanding what the scripture was saying compared to all the other religions, there couldn't be a religious aspect that could solve that with man. That was an old type religion. If you go back to the Old Testament, you were being taught, this is what you must do. This is what you must do. There was no discernment. But after the cross, when that got put onto people's hearts, we hear about those the dead whose hearts would hear. And is, you know, all the dead. And it's not just the dead who are dead. The people who walk around here, they're dead. We're all sinners, so we're all dead without the remedy. So everybody's going to hear his voice. Everybody's going to end up with making a choice. What frequency are you going to be tuned into when that comes in? Because, you know, if you go back to the New Age stuff and ordering from the universe, Alex, you bring yourself into alignment with what you want in your reality. And that's what you were just saying about what's going to reflect from the spiritual. Well, what are you downloading? What are you tuning into? What are you just looking or locked into this world? Because if you're locked into this world, you're just going to go with what this world is doing. There's no brakes on it then. You know, yeah. This is where we've got where the rubber is really hitting the road.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, interesting with you saying that, doing a little bit of a survey there, I think we can say that Augustine, in some way, St. Augustine hasn't helped, because when he talks about original sin, everyone's hung up on that now. I suspect what's a better phrase than original sin, because it makes everyone think that they're a sinner and it alienates them. And of course they are, biblically, but I don't think it's the most helpful phrase. You'd be better talking about original death, Because what happened was, when the decision was made to partake of the fruit, the forbidden fruit, eyes opened, death became inevitable. Then human beings came under the dominion of that deceiving serpent. So then that's like everyone is automatically going to die. And the dominion then, the God of this world, blinds the minds of unbelievers. Basically, everyone is under the dominion and curse of death, more specifically than sin. So what Jesus does, especially when he's resurrected, after he's defeated the cosmic powers through his death and fulfilled all the requirements, when he resurrects beyond death. So all those people who believe in him now have been taken out of the kingdom of the underworld, where they were as soon as they were born, even before they sinned. As soon as they were born to die, because of that first fracture brought about from a cosmic battle that humans got dragged into. They were innocent. Eve was it. What chance did Eve have in the face of this serpent, realistically? What chance did she really have? It's almost like it was inevitable. And that led to death. We were all then automatically born into death as an inevitability. And therefore, we're rescued not so much from our own sins, although that's a part of it, from the death sentence we were born into. And that tells you that you've got a loving God on a rescue mission who paid the ultimate price that we couldn't pay after the first transgression. That's a much healthier way to look at it, because people then don't immediately start thinking, oh, well, I'm condemned because I'm a sinner and I did something wrong. It's like, no, you're condemned because we're all part of the human condition that were made in the image of God that got corrupted. And the penalty for that was that we're all doomed. We're all going to die. And now we've been given a way out. That's much better. And the way to come out is to change your allegiance. Do not stay in allegiance with the Lord of Death who took you there in the first place, because otherwise you'll stay in that underworld. You know, whereas Jesus comes down to rescue us and take us out of that underworld following his resurrection into life. I think it's a much better way. Original death rather than original sin.
But there again, when you say, what is the world that we're born into? You know, when I came into this world, it was, this is who you are, this is what you must do, this is work hard, pay your bills. Everything was taught to me. When I asked about Jesus, my mum didn't know about Jesus. My dad didn't know about Jesus. Knew of him, but they weren't not even religious, never mind anything else, didn't read the Bible. So the two people I trusted most couldn't guide me on that. So now I have to listen to other people. Well, when I'm finding all these other stories that all talk about these plausible things because nobody seems to know what the truth was, then you are kept away from that truth. You are kept away from that remedy. And that's the subtlety. Eve wasn't told anything other than asked a question. She wasn't told anything. But it was that desire, that flame on type thing that focused. If you bear in mind something like the Ricky Gervais film, The Man Who Invented Lying, nobody's lied before and he lies. And then it goes everywhere. You can't keep it under control. Well, we're born into a world where we have got so many plausible things that nobody can prove either or, because we don't see the things that we've read in the Bible. We don't see any of that. You've got to have faith. You've got to have faith in what you can't see and hope in what you're hoping for, what you can see. So what frequency are we coming into alignment with? Well, I don't know what frequency is best because everything's messed up here.
Right.
So we needed that remedy. We needed that dial to be turned and said, this is the way. Truth is a person. I'm the way, the truth, the life. Believe me, and we're out of here.
So here we go, right, to add to that, to bring in the whole truth dimension that we see with the Babylonian system and the commercial jurisdiction, right? Love and integrity, if they prevailed rather than the fall and corruption and death, love and integrity would have seen us all connecting as a human brotherhood, a family in Eden, in paradise that God puts into that state. Everyone would have had a gentleman's agreement. Everyone's word would have been the bond. there would have been no need for contracts in an official legal sense that allowed the judicial system to kick in and preside over it parasitically, because everyone would have been coming from the heart, seeing everybody else as a brother. Their word would have been their bond. There would have been love and integrity, and that would have been propagated. And once that was lost, we had to have a system to regulate the evil in the hearts of men. And that system then was presided over by a layer of the judiciary of laws that were corruptible and manipulable. So our concept of agreement was not from the heart, it was from the mind's cynicism that my brother's going to screw me over. And why did I think that? Because of sin, he was going to screw me over. And therefore, we had to put contracts and laws in place to try and constrain the worst aspects. But then the parasites colonized it, started making money out of it, and so on. So to me, that's where this whole corrupt system has come from, because we lost with the fall love, integrity, gentlemen's agreements, a true brotherhood of all humanity created in God's image, because we lost it. And then that price to atone for that had to be paid, because there was no way of rescuing that system once it had collapsed. Once it was all fit for nothing but death, we need to be redeemed from it. But those who are not realigned with Christ are still operating in that contractual system, which is zero sum. I win because you lost. The solicitor, let's get the solicitor in so they can take all the pot of money from the divorce, so the parasites can take it all and leave you with nothing. Ultimately, that's another consequence of the fall. Not just sin and alienation from God, but a totally degenerate and a totally ransacked paradise that is now a hell on earth, and becoming one more and more so.
It also becomes interesting as we go into this. If Israel don't get their way, wherever they are in this plan, but allegedly, if Israel doesn't get their way, they're going to use the Samson project, or Samson defense, whatever they call it, which is nuclear. So they're going to nuclearly strike all these countries if they can't win and do what they want to do. So I think it's interesting that we also have the disclosure project, where everybody now wants to talk about aliens. They're going back to the moon, mate. You know, I've not seen anything to show me that we've been before, because normally when you return, you've already been there, haven't you? So they're going back there, but they're talking about this disclosure thing. Is there going to be, and don't forget Trump with his Star Force. So we just don't know. We haven't got a clue what's going on. To say that it could be just all these factions that we're watching out play this film, and then we've got this disclosure where either these aliens are going to come and attack, and they're going to come together, and it's going to go against something, or aliens going to turn up and maybe stop Israel, and there's these things that we've just got to say, well, those are plausible, but we can't discern them yet. But we've got to keep those kinds of things on the table. If we just come back to, I know we're coming up on time, but I've just got time to play these. Let's just see. The good news is when you couldn't hear the videos, Alex, they see. I went back onto YouTube, and they seem to play quite well over YouTube. So we'll go for it again. Just see if you can hear these couple of videos I've got now. When I can share.
So Nadim Zahawi came out and said that both him and Nigel Farage think that the COVID-19 jab rollout was a massive success.
I would not be sitting here, nor would Nigel be sitting next to me, if we didn't agree that we did the right thing for the nation to get the vaccine program to the success that it achieved.
Well, I don't know what your metric for success is, but in my opinion, thousands of excess deaths is not very successful, along with killing people with an experimental mRNA jab and redefining what a vaccine actually is, considering it was genetic therapy. I also don't think that massive amounts of side effects is a very good success story, along with actually killing innocent people. Myocarditis, blood clots, pericarditis, seizures, blackouts. The list goes on and on and on as to how harmful this jab is. And yet, in 2026, you both share a stage and re-endorse it. I think that this is a terrible, sickening state of affairs. We need complete accountability, and we need to have an open, expansive, detailed public inquiry into the handling of lockdown. And that man, Nadim Zahawi, should be one of the front runners for going to prison for life, in my opinion. I think a lot of people agree. And yet now he's being given a voice when it comes to the next government of the United Kingdom.
I think I might get locked up here, lads. Can you hear me, Alex?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, must just be the video that locks up. Well, the computer's deciding whether to say no or not. What do you think about that first video, if you heard it?
Yeah, I did. Well, I think what it tells me is that if people were under the illusion that Farage was the UK Trump, they're wrong. And I think he's making some worrying moves. The problem is always the same. When you're within a political system, some people say, don't vote, don't support the system. In which case, you don't vote, you don't support the system. Those people who do, you get Labour in. Is it better to have Labour or Reform? Reform. There's going to be big problems with Reform because it's still mainstream, that's clear. But my philosophy is any change when it's got that bad is better than no change generally. And if it's going to be worse secretly later down the road, it's all part of the divine providence, because at the end of the day, all we can do, we're bipeds walking around, sharing ideas, trying to refine our worldview and our understanding, and trying to have the most rewarding and productive life that we can. There's so much stuff we can't control. This is where ultimately we have to come back to trusting God. But at the end of the day, it is alarming. I think the recent developments with Reform are worrying. And therefore, people need to be very aware that some things would change, but a lot of things would get worse. And it's about the trade-off. But overall, the movement, if it's a cosmic battle, this is where, we look at it at one level and we say, oh, it's the human actors involved. It is. But who's pulling the strings? And we tend to think of the hidden hand as humans behind the scenes. But who's operating behind those dark figures in suits behind the scenes? Spiritual powers, spiritual entities, malevolences. And what are they? They're not caricatures like from the Exorcist movie. They're creatures that whisper in your ear. They infect your mind and your thoughts. And if you don't discern and you've not had your mind renewed, you'll listen to them and think it's your thoughts. Hey, that's a good idea. But did it come from you? The battlefield is the mind, where the thoughts are, and that's where the spiritual entities whisper. And if you don't have discernment, like Jesus, he's there, he's fasted, and he's hungry, and he could almost be hallucinating. Turn these stones into bread. Turn these stones into bread. Right? So what's he going to be led by? Is hunger, which is not wrong. Is he going to be led by that, or is he going to recognize what's going on? The problem that we face writ large when we're looking at these big screens is we all get distracted, decoyed by characters, following this one, following that one. And that's what it said in the end times. Many messiahs and false Christs will arise, many saviors saying, hey, Luke, and then peace. So ultimately, if we can't discern deeper than that, 10 to a penny, we're going to get led astray.
That's why he says, I'm the way, the truth, the life. Don't listen to these. Let all men be liars. It's why he says it. Let's see if the computer says yes.
Thoughts on the recruitment of Nadim Zahawi, a dyed-in-the-wool Tory who was very open in his criticism of Nigel Farage when he was still working with Rishi Sunak. and a man who, I'll just play you this before you talk, Ben, a man who at a debate at the Oxford Union in 2014 said that we must keep the borders open because migration is a really, really great thing for the country. Have a listen to this.
The UK remits more than £2 billion overseas every year. Some of the poorest economies, like Somalia, are entirely dependent on money remitted by the Somali diaspora. Unlike official aid, remittances between family can't be embezzled or misspent by corrupt regimes. So significant cuts to immigration would cut off a major financial lifeline to the world's poorest, resulting in stronger demand for government aid.
So there you have it, Ben. At least in 2014, he wanted more and more immigration, more migration. Also, we learned yesterday, he hasn't confirmed this, but the word in Westminster is that he defected to Reform UK in high dudgeon after lobbying the Tories for a peerage. And when they said, no, you're a tax dodger, no way, off he went to Reform land. So your thoughts generally on this guy being the big scout for Reform UK?
Well, the first thought, obviously, which I imagine most of your viewers have already had, is that Zahawi is part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. He's a globalist. You heard the way he described the need to look after Somalia. Since when did it become the British taxpayer's obligation to make sure that remittances could get back to Somalia, seamlessly, without touching the hands of dictators and going through our aid system? He wanted that. He wanted mass migration. He sees it as a positive for the United Kingdom. He's also, you didn't mention it, but I'm sure you're aware, he's also on the record saying we should give an amnesty to all people who've entered the country illegally and just grant them asylum. And I think that was in 2013. Grant everyone who's entered the country illegally asylum, and let's move on. And of course, you mentioned the fact that he had his tax affairs questioned by HMRC at a time when he was actually Chancellor of the Exchequer, but did not make people aware.
Which is why he had to step down. You can't have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who's dodging his tax.
Absolutely. So he was sacked by Rishi Sunak, but acceptable to Reform. And the thing that when I first saw him join Reform yesterday, I thought to myself, well, that's no surprise to me, because I've been watching Reform, and you would have heard me being quite critical of Reform over the last year and a bit, during which period Reform has taken on one Tory after another. Howard Cox, a colleague of mine, did a brilliant post yesterday on X, in which he listed, I think, 20-odd former failed Tory MPs who had now joined Reform. And the trend towards taking on failed Tory MPs by Reform has just accelerated over the last year and a half, notwithstanding all the protestations by Reform that they wouldn't do it. Now, I understand the cunning need and the tactical need to do it. What Farage is doing is trying to own the political landscape. He wants momentum. He wants to keep the momentum going politically so that he can garner as much support as possible and give the appearance of having people capable of governing the country going forward. But the problem is, there is no one who has been in government in the last 25 years, 30 years, that you would wish to have in government going forward, pretty much, with the exception of perhaps a handful of people. And the correct thing to do for Reform is not to go for the political expediency of infecting yourself with all the same people who have created the problem, but clean the Orgean stable out and get new people in who are actually pro-British, believe in this country, not globalists like Zahawi, won't give in to the globalist agenda of mass migration and remittances back to Somalia for the benefit of the Somalians, and put our country first, our people first, and make the arguments for that. If Farage could stay true to that single principle, Reform would be in a much, much better place. But Zahawi's recruitment did not surprise me. It comes at the end of a long, long recruitment of failed Tories.
Don't think you can argue too much with that one, Alex.
No, it's spot on. Obviously, he's trying to control the political landscape. It's a tough one. I mean, just a strategy, regardless of judging the moral tone or whether he's the real deal or not on whatever level. It's a very difficult decision. And it's a unique landscape where new political parties are emerging with a chance, actually, from only having had four or five seats to getting in at the next parliament. That shows you the level. That's unthinkable normally. The disaffectation of the populace is such. Like, we talk about everything being in radical flux. It really is. At a nation-state level, at an individual level. So it's like, that's why Trump can get away with a lot of the outrageous maneuvers and destabilize it further. And if you're crafty and you're shrewd, you can make a lot of headway. So we know, like with Farage, he's thinking, right, well, people like Zahawi and others and Jenrick, they might go, oh, right, yeah, I'm self-interested here. I'm going to jump ship. And they might have some downsides to them. But because they're a big name, in terms of the optics, for the people who are voting for reform for dodgy reasons, but they just want change and they don't think, they'll go, oh, wow, right. He's getting some of the best heads that were in there. He's building momentum. Because if you just get all new people with no experience, it can backfire. He should really do that in theory, but he needs a blend between old and new. But I don't think he should be taking on board people who have clearly been, like Jenrick was a Remainer. Zahawi was peddling the vaccine. You know, they've talked about fracking as well. So they are going to select some very unpopular policies, including privatising the NHS fully. So there's about 4 or 5 key policies and recruits who are actually indicating that they could swing back out of political expediency. When they started off, it was all, we're iconoclastic, we're idealists in the nuts and bolts of who we are. We believe the system's been corrupted. We've got to leverage this. It's taken me years fighting against Europe. I'm pure. I'm relentless. But now he's compromising at the edges. I can understand why he thinks it's important, but it's a big mistake. I don't think it reflects necessarily that he's dodgy, but he's definitely not as positive a force as Trump. Regardless of what you think long term with Trump, just on the superficial level, what Trump is doing for me is much more credible than what Farage is doing.
Well, I think when you compare Trump to Farage, Trump is revolutionary. He's flipped everything over. Of course, a man can't be a woman. Of course, a woman can't have a penis. Of course, a man can't get pregnant. Trump's gone to that. But the funny thing is, the vaccine stuff is still there. All that infrastructure is still there. They're still saying, do this to your children, not only in America, but they're doing it here. So they've got policies that all agree with each other, just like every political party that there's ever been in charge. What we argue about, what we debate, is what they debate. What they agree upon, we don't know unless we go and look. And when we look at the manifestos, we get to see there's direction about the climate change. I know Taylor said we should be seeing that come to an end, but it is blatantly bloody obvious that none of this stuff is true, that it has been propagandized, it has been taught as truthful, and they've done it since that education system. We've been groomed so much, Alex, in these generations since World War II, with an education system, with an entertainment industry that was all politicized, that was all then made everything is okay, everything goes, do what you want, just don't hurt people, all be from love. Well, you can then be involved in all that and say, I'm a Christian. That subtlety could be enough for you to say, Lord, Lord, did I not do this in your name? And you've missed the point. That's why this is now, for me, Alex, it's coming to a fulcrum. There's everything's building up. Where you are with what you believe your life is and who you are and what this world is to you, if you believe you're in this world and you're of it and there's nothing else, then you're on a frequency, you're on a road, and it's broad, and there's loads of people going with you. So you'll think, hey, I'm right, because everybody's agreeing with me. I think me and you disagreed with once or twice over so many things in the last 15 years, mate. It makes you stand out. because when people say that you're wrong and then they give you an opinion on a belief with no evidence, there's nothing to debate. Once somebody's called somebody a name, then the debate starts to fail. So I think I think we're coming to that. Go on, mate.
I'd just say with Ned commenting there again, saying it's similar to the problem that Trump had in his first administration. Ned would probably, I'm guessing, suggest that the distinction between Farage and Trump is also the fact that Trump appears more revolutionary is a product of the fact that he is taking a stance against the globalism born in the British Empire, whereas Farage is a lot closer to the city of London. And he has to mind his P's and Q's a lot more because for a start, we are nowhere near as big as the States, and he is right in the cauldron of it. So we can't necessarily know, I suppose, about the real deep down character, the private character of these individuals. But in the case of Farage, smaller country, still in opposition, much closer to the British imperialist project. So he has to stay a lot more balanced about things. Like, for example, I've heard it said that the establishment over here simply will not allow Farage to get in. And maybe that's why he might have made a few concessions to allow some typical establishment people in, thinking he can absorb it a bit, and that they might sort of take the thumb screws off him a little, and he thinks he'll maybe manage it later on. But he's playing a dicey game. But I do think that it could well be that we are much more in the thick of it here, because obviously this is the heartland of the British Empire.
Yeah, certainly is. I think, like I said, I think it's going to be. It's already started to be an interesting year, but I think it's going to become even more interesting. We've gone over time, Taylor. So, do you want to give us a wrap up of what you think of this evening and the information you've heard, and especially I know you don't do predictions, but what direction you see the next week happening?
Well, I can't say what's going to happen in the next week. But what I will say though is that as usual, I'll just do my plugins because why not? That's my Rumble channel is Raconteurs Report. I just uploaded part 1 of my read through of Interview with Hitler, which is a fictional interview with it, which is a book that's about a fictional interview with Hitler, and I forget what the woman's name is, some black woman, if he was alive today and allowed to tell his side of the story. So it's that's my Rumble, and my Twitter handle is of course Raconteurs Report as well. My email is chimpyskippy@gmail.com. If you want to message me, feel free to. And my YouTube channel is also Raconteurs Report, but at the same time, I haven't been doing much of it because I'm worried about YouTube sacking me again. So, it's tough out here. But I will say, though, that all I see is good things coming in the future. It's getting, things are heating up, and I'm really liking it. And by the way, as far as Nigel Farage goes, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Alex. Obviously, I don't live there, so I can't exactly say 100%. But my gut feeling is telling me that Nigel Farage is, as you said, you got to play the games. You have to remember, back in 2016, JD Vance had to play the game too. He was supposedly anti-Trump back in 2016. So you have to play certain games and make certain concessions to be able to get power. Putin had to do the same thing back when he first came to power in 2000. When you first come to power, when you're weak, you got to make concessions. When you become strong, though, that's when you can really do what you want and do the agenda. So I'll go ahead and leave it at that.
Nice one, mate. Thanks for giving up your time again, Taylor. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and chat on the show and bring your perspective. So, God willing, I'll see you next week, my friend.
All right. Well, actually, after you finish the broadcast, there's actually something small I wanted to discuss with you, if you don't mind.
Alex, are you all right to do that?
Yeah.
Should only take a few
All right,
minutes. It's not a big deal.
Okay, pal. I'll speak to you in a minute.
Okay.
So, interesting topics tonight. I know you said we went all over the place, but it's very hard to not start stretching that fabric to go all over the place because there's no separate lumps at the minute. Everything's starting to join, and again, we look at we look at the individual scenarios, what's going on in each country. All these fires, it's like the watchtowers are lit across the whole world. So something's coming, they're communicating, and through all these things, they're communicating one thing, that something's happening. The scriptures tell us that this is what's happening. I've never seen anything like what's in the Bible physically happen. And I've heard about, the end is nigh for 40 odd years, mate. But to think that, we're talking, I've got one last video to play before we go, which just sums up again about this Board of Peace thing. I think it's quite poignant. But before I use that to play us out, mate, what would you say for the evening?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. The tech gremlins struck again, and you just disappeared. And that's always interesting. But I think, you have to think on your feet and go, well, what will I talk about here? Because once the dialogue dies, the prompting with the questions, you lose that. And suddenly it's like, right, okay. And it just struck me, the whole thing. So that's how I'd recap really about the trickster. The whole idea, which explains a lot, that we live in a world, and we have for a long time, where the Judeo-Christian traditions and the Greek traditions were dominant. And, we had this very much moralistic, legalistic framework, black or white, right and wrong, yes, no. There was no grey. And what the tricksters always taught was that when you inhabit that uncertain space, if you look at how much in life we don't know the answer to, we really don't. We talk all the time as believers, what's the Lord's will for my life? Do I wait? How long do I wait? Do I act decisively and just trust that he'll work with that? We have more questions than answers, no matter how much we think we know, no matter how much we think our faith is solid. So when you're forced to inhabit the grey, everything has to mature in your life. It's well known that adolescent perspectives are black and white. Kids' perspectives are black and white. It's all based on a basic emotional protest about something and how they feel. It's very black and white. When you have to sit in the grey, you can't take much for granted. You've got to learn to live with tension. So for me, I'd say why Trump is so successful with this policy of shaking things up is because we've all become so complacent for so long. We've all become so shapeable in that culture that we have a shared delusion. When it says in 2 Thessalonians 2, about for that reason, God shall send a powerful delusion so that they will believe a lie instead of the truth. It's like the parameters of that delusion are in a world that's been constructed exclusively in this side of the line's right, this side of the line's wrong. And everybody just takes a side and then they defend it for grim life. And it's just a form of ego buttressing. And ultimately, when you have to sit in the grey, what did Jesus mean when he said, do not judge that you be not judged? Learn to sit sometimes with not knowing. Understand the limits of your own ability to understand anything, because your perspective stretches so far. You see the speck in your brother's eye, but you can't see the log in your own. It's an impossibility. This is why we have to hand it over to the judge on high and not take it off the altar ourselves.
Amen to that, mate. Amen to that. Thanks to everybody in the chat room who's made it this far with us live, and thank you to everybody who's made it to the end of this video. after the live. All I can say is we've had a lot of good messaging, correspondence coming backwards and forwards, that people are joining dots to stuff that they've researched and got, and the joining dots what we're bringing, the joining them and discerning them, whether they agree or they're not. They have to hold that information and discern it. And the messages that I'm seeing, Alex, is that people are seeing things. They've seen that through that reform thing, but what's behind that? Because they're showing it us. Are they really relying on us being either that stupid or that apathetic? Are they really hinging it on that? Or do they just say, let's go for it, let's just put it into chaos, and somebody will come along and offer what the fix is? Who knows? But again, we've got to come back to what the spiritual battle truly is. And we see a lot of these religions now all saying that we all go to God. Come on, we can all shake hands. Even the ones that want to kill us, it's getting ridiculous. And the scriptures tell you that this is what's going to happen between all these religions and all these politics.
Let he who has eyes to see.
And with that, amen. Now, God bless, guys.
Good night, guys.
Listen up. So Trump finally released the names of the people that are on the board of peace. First off, we have Tony Blair, who is the former UK Prime Minister. And we have Marco Rubio, which is the U.S. Secretary of State. We have Steve Witkoff, who is the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East. Of course, Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, billionaire Mark Rowland, and the CEO of Apollo Global Management. You got to have those technocrats in there. We also have Ajay Banga, however you say it, president of the World Bank. He's advised a number of senior U.S. politicians, including Barack Obama. But this one is strange. Robert Gabriel. He's the U.S. National Security Advisor. Now, I can't find one pic of this man. No pictures. So that's suspicious. I wonder when he will be revealed. And then this creepy one named Nikolay Mladenov or whatever, a Bulgarian politician and former UN Middle East envoy. Now, what I really want to talk to you all about is what Trump said. As chairman of the Board of Peace, I am backing a newly appointed Palestinian technocratic government. Now, I made a video about this last week because nobody has recently talked about this. The technocracy is the government or control of society or industry by an elite of technical experts. This guy right here is Joshua Haldeman, and he is the grandfather of Elon Musk. He created Technocracy Inc. and believed in this thing called the Technate of America. In 1943, Haldeman joined the Social Credit Party of Canada. He believed North America should be ran by technocrats and that we should have Greenland, Canada, the United States, Mexico, and Venezuela, which is exactly what Donald Trump is doing or trying to do. And with this system, they wanted to give everyone a energy distribution card. There would be some kind of universal basic income, and everyone would be given an energy allotment amount, and you could not go over that. It would be attached to this card. Computers weren't big back then, but with the computers, this would be perfect. So now they're literally talking about doing it in Palestine. And if they're bringing this to Palestine, how long do you think it'll be until they bring it to the United States? Don't forget what this person said the other day.
We know there's a big housing speech. What else can we anticipate? There's also going to be some look at the new world order that President Trump is creating. And,
not to mention, on the 21st of January, Donald Trump will be giving the keynote at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, about what this new world order. But yes, some of y'all will cheer this on like it's a good thing, even though Christians with discernment know what's coming.